Babies, I do wish you'd think twice about this.
My name is Mike Farrell. I speak as a survivor of the nuclear age. My country is armed, prepared to defend itself. Other countries are equally well armed. Together, we hold the power to destroy each other and the world, yet we refrain from doing so. As long as we continue to not use our weapons, I will continue to survive, and so will they.
The United States detonated the first atomic bomb in 1945. In an attempt to end a terrible war, we unleashed the nuclear age. Soon the Russians had their own bomb, and since then we've been engaged in an arms race, a race we can lead but never win. Both sides have stocked up enough firepower to obliterate the entire planet, and both now feel less secure than ever before. Although our leaders expressed deep concern about it, they seem to have spent more time developing weapons than trying to find an alternative. Now, Americans as well as Russians are being forced to think twice about the consequences of today's arms race, to think about the unthinkable, nuclear war. How are we reacting to these second thoughts? What does the threat of nuclear war mean to us? Can we do anything to prevent it?
Many people think we can. A nuclear physicist and a peace activist. A physician from Moscow. A professor at Harvard. A family from California. And a group of teenagers in Colorado. These are a few of the people acting to prevent nuclear war. First, we'll meet the Strandberg family of Richmond, Virginia. Like most Americans, they hadn't thought very much about the risks of nuclear war until they agreed to open their home to our cameras while they learned all they could about the arms race.
Here's where I have some fun.
My name is David Strandberg, and I'm 9. My brother's name is John, and he's 11. My sister's name is Karen, and she's 14. My oldest brother, Steve, is 16. My mom and dad's name are Adrian and Warren.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, thanks.
We've been talking about war and nuclear bombs. Maybe you'll be seeing our story.
During the course of 1 month, the Strandbergs attend seminars, read government studies, and watch over a dozen films on their home video player. Films representing a wide range of views on the vital issues of our nuclear age.
A nation's hope of lasting peace cannot be firmly based upon any race in armaments, but rather upon just relations and honest understanding with all other nations. What can the world, or any nation in it, hope for if no turning is found on this dread road? The worst to be feared and the best to be expected can be simply stated. The worst is atomic war. The best would be this: a life of perpetual fear and tension, a burden of arms draining the wealth and labor of all peoples, a wasting of strength that defies the American system or the Soviet system or any system to achieve true abundance and happiness for the peoples of this earth. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed.
The events of the world don't really affect my life. And I guess it doesn't affect my friends much either. I mean, I can't get into anything like that. You know, what goes, goes. Us little people can't do much.
You know, I don't really know that much about it, but I don't know, I like to keep up with being informed. Just, you know, it has to do a lot with my life. You know, I like to know what's, you know, what might happen to me or my country, my friends.
I don't know too much about nuclear war. My friends don't think about it much either. Why should we? Richmond's a real safe kind of place.
With only half the gross national product of the United States, the Soviets have outspent Americans on the military for many years. They are spending 3 times as much of their gross national product as the United States, actually spending 50% more than the United States for arms. Such a rapid and intense armament program has not occurred since Hitler's armament of Germany before World War II.
This is an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile. Both the United States and the Soviet Union have thousands of these nuclear missiles aimed at each other this very moment. Once they're launched, there's no calling them back. Flight time, 30 minutes. In 1970, the U.S. successfully deploys what is called MIRV, M-I-R-V. This enables one missile launcher to send up to 14 warheads at separate targets. About 5 years later, the Soviets deploy the same system.
Why are we fighting? We have nothing to fight about. Or, I mean, why is there a reason to fight?
Yeah.
Well, if you look at another country building up all of those weapons that we saw the other night on the film, all those Russian weapons, you say, well, why are they building those Russian weapons? Except to maybe attack us someday, you know.
It's just a fear of communism. We, as a country, generally feel that communism is not the best way of life, that democracy is.
You know, they say a lot of it's technical, and it probably is. And that you've got to have a technical background and, you know, to understand all the related issues. But somehow, if it's left up to the technicians, you know, I'm afraid.
What started this?
What started this?
Yeah.
Just people, governments wanted to have peace with the other countries by building up bigger weapons than the other country has. Some people have the theory that if you have real big weapons, you know, and you're a lot stronger than the other country, then you have peace.
I know, but they'll just build more. Try to get more.
Right, and so will we.
I know, but where will it end?
Probably by either blowing up each other or coming to some sort of an agreement where we can just disarm them all.
I know, but what would we do with them if we disarmed them all?
I don't know.
So are we talking about danger from fallout, or am I wrong about Richmond being a target?
Well, I understand that Richmond has a population of about 250,000 people, 250,000 people. If there were an all-out nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union, Richmond would be hit. It would probably be hit by several nuclear weapons. If a 1 megaton bomb were exploded directly over the state capitol, everything within about a mile would be flattened. The Civil War statues on Monument Avenue would be lying on the ground. Virginia Commonwealth University would have disappeared. Out to about 6 miles, winds at 100 miles an hour would smash people against anything, buildings and cars, and kill them. Fires would ignite spontaneously with anything made of wood or paper.
So much for civilization.
That's right.
What are some of the solutions to the arms race? What can people do about it? Everyone's frightened, I suppose, about it, but what are the alternatives?
What's lacking is not ideas for alternatives as much as it is public concern and public involvement to say we want to see those ideas developed.
The Strandbergs continue to learn. In nearby Norfolk, they visit a ship in the U.S. Navy's nuclear fleet. With friends and neighbors, they talk frankly about nuclear war. Adrian and Warren Strandberg decide to introduce their children to a woman from Hiroshima, Japan, a survivor of the first atomic blast.
You know, tomorrow we're having a special guest for dinner. Her name is Hiroko, and she's from Japan. And she lived there at the time when the atomic bomb went off. She was 13 years old. This book was written to help us to remember the time when the atomic bomb went off. It would be very easy to forget what happened, because let me show you a picture of what Hiroshima looks like right now, today. Right there's the picture of it. And wouldn't it be easy to forget that an atomic bomb once went off there? This is a picture, John, of Nagasaki, because after we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, then we dropped another one on Nagasaki.
Where was it dropped?
Right here in this city. And let me show you now what it looked like when we dropped the bomb. And if we didn't have this picture, this book of pictures to remind us of what it was like, it would be easy to forget, wouldn't it?
But we heard some noise for airplane noise. So my friend said, Hiroko, B-29 is up there. We never know how dangerous, because we never had like that trouble in Hiroshima City. Also, I was only 13 years old. Don't worry, nothing, right? So I look at, then flash. I thought I got myself for bomb or shot. Then I don't know how long I was unconscious. Must be I was unconscious. I wake up 1.5 kilometers from center. So I get up. I was lucky, went to the river. But some people went to the center of the city.
Yeah.
Then also fire coming from center. So many days burned.
Could you see it from the hill then looking down?
I cannot remember. But I can see it all destroyed.
You can.
I saw all Hiroshima City was destroyed.
Currently, U.S. defense preparedness planning expects some 40 to 60 million prompt fatalities after a nuclear explosion. These fatalities will cause a very significant health hazard. Most of them will be located in the northeast corridor between New York and Boston and in Southern California. The present plan to deal with this health hazard is to dig very long trenches with construction equipment, to requisition quicklime, and to bulldoze the bodies into these trenches, cover them with quicklime, and bury them. No attempt will be made to identify these fatalities so that next of kin can be notified. If the time were taken to do this, the health hazard that would be posed would be insurmountable. It's not without interest that 20 years ago, when a committee organized by the President studied the problem of providing health care in the post-attack era, their recommendation simply was to stockpile opium to make it a little easier for people to get over into the other world. That still is our primary response to a nuclear attack, our opium and morphine stockpiles.
I don't think there's even a plan in Richmond for civil defense, which must mean people don't really think it's going to happen if there's no plan.
Or if it does happen, there's no defense.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any plan.
How would we react to people knocking on our door who were burned, perhaps hurt, sick?
That they needed help.
What would we do?
Help them.
I'd keep them for about a week, then I'd probably take them to a hospital. And then keep them here until they find a place to live or something.
Well, the hospital would probably be jam-packed.
Oh, yeah. Just keep them here and feed them.
I just have to let everybody in. We'd eat what was there, and then we'd all die. I couldn't turn people away.
I want to defend our country, but I don't want to have war.
This family couldn't afford to build themselves a refuge. This could be the way the last 2 minutes of peace in Britain would look. 9:16 a.m. A single megaton nuclear missile overshoots Manston Airfield in Kent and airbursts 6 miles from this position. At this distance, the heat wave is sufficient to cause melting of the upturned eye wall, 3rd-degree burning of the skin, and ignition of furniture. seconds later, the shock counter lands. When the carbon monoxide content of inhaled air exceeds 1.28%, it will be followed by death within 3 minutes. This is nuclear war. The world's stockpile of thermonuclear weapons has doubled within the last 5 years, and now is the equivalent of almost 20 tons of high explosive to every man, woman, and child on the planet. This stockpile is still steadily growing.
Do you see any danger, Tim, in nuclear war in terms of there being no winners and no losers?
There won't be any winners, no. It's something we live with, though, day and night. But you can't live without it, though.
What would it be like if you tried to live without it, from your own perspective?
Well, you'd fall prey to those that had it.
You think the Russians would give it to us?
The Russians or anybody else.
I feel a little more frustrated about the nuclear arms race because the bombs nowadays are 1,000 times more powerful than the ones dropped on Japan. Now we've got enough to destroy the whole world.
"10 years from now, if I had my own kids, I'd try and let them know if there was still a threat of nuclear war, which probably there will be, if it hasn't already happened. I would educate my kids well enough so that they'll know exactly what's going on in the world."
Come on, Jeffy. I feel stronger about the issue of nuclear war than I did before. I feel like I'd like to do something. My life is just too busy to be a leader in anything like that. But if there was an organization, I'd certainly like to support it.
I guess I think of future generations, too, and our kids, as they've gone through, this particular program of taping, wondering more about them and what 50, 60 years will bring if we continue in the same direction we're now going. Our children are survivors of the nuclear age, but would they thank us? The legacy of my generation to theirs is both fear and hope. Fear that we will destroy their world. Hope that they can find the answer where we have failed.
Like the Strandbergs, most of us feel confused and helpless, grief-stricken in a sense, if we think twice about nuclear war. We say, what can an average person do? Or, this is a problem for the experts. We've learned to accept our plight and that of our children with resignation.
Attention, attention, those of you in your homes, run to your shelters.
In the 1950s and early 60s, the superpowers conducted atmospheric tests of nuclear weapons, while we built bomb shelters. Our government assured us that if we listened to the experts, we would survive.
There'll be an intense flash of light, and when you see that light, forget all about shelters and preparation. Just don't look at that light. Cover your eyes with your elbows like this, and then dive for cover. What you have just seen is the worst that could happen. But remembering this, might someday save your life.
But even then, some were not convinced.
We worked very hard trying to stop the above-ground testing. I was a full-time mother, and that took a lot of time and energy. I think I've been concerned since we dropped the bomb in Hiroshima. I think I'm a kind of a concerned type.
The year was 1961. Francis Crowe and a small but determined group of citizens called Women's Strike for Peace rallied the nation to end the above-ground tests. They warned of the dangers of radioactive strontium-90, which concentrates in milk when it enters the environment as fallout. Many of the protesters were young mothers who had never marched before.
Our children all were little then, and they never could drink fresh milk. It was always mixing powdered milk that didn't have strontium-90 in it. Well, when we finally stopped the testing in the atmosphere in 1964, and we got a test ban agreement, we were kind of diverted for 10 years from working on the weapons issue. And meanwhile, the government was just using that time to really build up our nuclear arsenal.
In 1981, Francis Crowe again takes up the banner of peace. She joins 2,000 others, mostly women, to march in Washington, D.C. They choose Mother's Day, because Mother's Day was founded during the Franco-Prussian War as a day of peace.
I go, for the pleasure as much as anything, to see all these wonderful people, to hear all the speeches and get energized.
The thing that moved me out of the pro-armament group to the anti-armament group was a photograph of Women's Strike for Peace demonstrating in the rain in New York.
As a middle-class type, was very uneasy about demonstrations. I can still remember the first time I picketed. I felt like an idiot going round and round in an oval. Not only frustrating, but embarrassing to feel that you're making an ass of yourself in public and that nobody gets the message at all. But after a while, I began to realize a few people get it each time. You can only build gradually.
Well, do you ever get frustrated?
I'm frustrated all the time, but I'll never give up. I think this is the most important thing, is never give up.
There are people all over the world who, like Francis Crowe and Dr. Spock, have made the personal decision to prevent nuclear war. Hundreds of thousands of Europeans on both sides of the Iron Curtain are concerned about superpower weapons designed to wage limited nuclear war and are proving again that the actions of people can make a difference. Paris, Bonn, London, and Bucharest. The large marches held in these cities give weight to the Soviet and American arms negotiations.
There's no substitute for grassroots, hard organizing, changing people's minds. There's no shortcut to the good life.
For some, protesting is not enough. Juanita Nelson and her husband Wally resist the arms race more directly. The Nelsons, like a number of Americans, refuse to pay taxes for war.
The government spends more than 50% for war purposes. On the 15th of April, when everyone is running to be sure that their taxes are paid, I think that someone ought to stand out and ask people, why are you doing this? And to remind people that what the government does with its money is actually wrong.
I guess the most that has happened to us is that we've had numerous visits from the IRS. Paying taxes is not just a thing by itself. I think it is tied up in a package. It's very difficult if one wants to live the same kind of life one has always lived. It might mean a complete change in our lifestyle.
Oh, that's what that...
Juanita was a newspaper reporter in the 1940s when she met Wally. He was serving a jail sentence for resisting the draft. Although both have had many jobs, they always held back their taxes. Now they live self-sufficiently and owe no taxes.
We're trying to be as self-sufficient as we can, as I guess I'd say as self-provisioning as we can. We provide 70–80% of our food from our own garden. And the cash we think we need anyway, we make also from our garden. I feel rather strongly about tax resistance because I think that's the most direct way in which we participate in the killing in the military. I think we don't want to give up anything, plus the fact that I think we feel so helpless because we say, what can one person do? But it's one and one and one and one, and that adds up. Obviously, if none of us would pay for armaments or produce them, we wouldn't have any.
The buildup of America's nuclear arsenal serves more than our national defense needs. Weapons production is big business and is highly integrated into our economy. Although some defense workers are morally opposed to the weapons they build, most people who work in the defense industry believe that they are contributing to America's national security. This is the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, one of the centers of American nuclear weapons development. Bill Chandler and his co-researchers accept their work in the arms field as a challenge to prevent nuclear war by designing better, not necessarily bigger, bombs.
I'm a nuclear weapons physicist involved in doing calculations and modeling of nuclear weapons. Livermore has an enormous computer system, probably one of the largest in the world. The whole object here is simulation of weapons physics so that you don't have to go to Nevada and test. It's much cheaper to run a computer problem, much safer to run a computer problem.
Okay, why don't we...
The primary reason, really, to be involved in nuclear weapons game is defense. I can't conceive of not having them as long as the guy across the ocean has them and he's got them aimed at me. Nuclear weapons don't cause wars. It's people that cause wars. You can't deny physics and you can't deny the inevitability almost of what came about. I guess you could go out and kill all your physicists, but that's not going to stop it. I don't feel any constraint put on me by society to control what I do or control my physics. How does someone who doesn't have a degree in nuclear physics tell a nuclear physicist where he can and cannot tread? I didn't grow up saying I wanted to be a nuclear weapons physicist at Livermore. I sort of evolved here through the military, and I'm still here. It's a joy working with what I think are some of the brightest physicists in the world. You might have 1,000 PhDs at that lab, ranging from directors down to brand new people coming out of college, but everyone's on a first-name basis. Edward Teller is Ed, and there's a closeness, there's a humanity among the people, and there's a true concern about a good product. I see myself as someone who's working on preventing nuclear war. I think anybody who works for the defense of the nation thinks of that. And we probably don't want a nuclear war more than a lot of people because I think we understand it. And then if there was a nuclear war, we're all going to feel terribly guilty. Nobody wants to pick up a gun and kill somebody. Nobody wants to drop a bomb on anybody. God knows I don't.
Bill Chandler is one of the team of scientists who created the neutron bomb, which they call a clean weapon because it kills people instantly with less blast and fallout. Neutron bombs, smaller than other modern warheads, are about equal in size to the Hiroshima bomb.
The neutron bomb will do just considerably less damage. It'll kill far fewer people. It'll do much less damage to the environment. To say that using a neutron bomb is going to lead to throwing nuclear weapons back and forth from Moscow to New York, that's not a valid argument. You can't extrapolate that far. But if we use a neutron bomb in Germany, will the Soviets come back and use a dirty weapon in Germany? And where does it stop? Would I rather be dead than red? It came down to the point where the experiment in democracy called the United States was over. I think I could condone using them. I mean, you have to have a little sanity about the matter, too. You're certainly not going to use them to the point where the Earth is gone. Because maybe if there was going to be no planet Earth when you're through, then maybe being red is better than being dead. But I still think we should have it for the deterrent, for the nuclear chess game that we seem like we have to play, because it doesn't seem to be any alternative right now.
You think we should keep building nuclear weapons, the United States?
To beat Russia? Yeah.
Without it, I know I wouldn't be safe.
Not sure about more, but we better build better ones. What would you do if there was a nuclear war?
I don't know, go to my house and close my door.
If I can afford a fallout shelter, I'll buy one.
Go underground in a cave.
I'm getting into a construction business of building underground caves.
We're from Ohio, and we don't have any caves.
I don't know how I would survive. I guess I wouldn't. Radiation will eat me up, and that's that.
I hope I'm taken with the first one that was ever dropped.
I'm not so sure I want to survive if there was a nuclear war. Because the Holocaust afterwards wouldn't be really worth seeing or living for. That's pessimistic, but I think it's probably true.
It would be so exciting. It would be so powerful. It would punish us for our sins. Things wouldn't be so boring anymore. We could get back to basics. We would remember who we love. It would be so loud. It would be so hot. The mushroom clouds would rise up. We could start over. We wouldn't have to be afraid of it anymore. We wouldn't have to be afraid anymore. We would finally have done it, and we could rest.
I just asked myself one morning, what's good about the bomb? What's the attraction? And the poem was the answer. We may as well just tell the truth about as much of ourselves as we can in relation to the bomb, just to shed light on the problem. It's God's fire. It's us controlling the most powerful, interesting, mysterious, bright phenomenon there is.
Alia Johnson is a writer who works with her husband, Bob Fuller, a nuclear physicist turned peace theorist. They believe we must honestly assess what they see as our fascination with war. Bob and Alia fear that the proliferation of atomic weapons could drag the superpowers into an unwanted confrontation. But their approach is not a traditional one.
The peace movement posits disarmament as the answer, and I just don't think it is. That's something like saying the way I should keep my two kids from hitting each other is to chop off their arms, to disarm them. You know? Well, we're always going to have the technology to destroy each other, and it's going to keep getting more powerful.
I think that the occasion of the third bomb, the one following Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in other words, the third time it's used purposefully for killing. With the spread of these weapons, it's possible that someday this will happen. The occasion of that third bomb will be the decisive moment in the history of humankind. And something has to be done under those circumstances. It's human nature. We have to do something. At least someone has to do something on our behalves. And so what you get to do is either express compassion or express rage.
Responding to it almost like a family catastrophe. You know, your teenage daughter committed suicide, and usually the response of the whole family committing mass suicide is not the proper response. The response is that the world comes in, the people who care come in and take care of the family.
So I'm looking for a symbolic act that humankind could make which would change the consciousness of the world away from that automatic eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth quality. Imagine what would happen if, when the third bomb goes off, assuming there is one sometime, the world's medical resources were all brought to bear suddenly and swiftly and effectively in a global act of compassion. It'll be an occasion for maturing suddenly in how the medical profession behaves and how the media behave at that instant will really shape the future forever. I agree with her analysis on the other hand.
Bob and Alia, with their friend David Hoffman, formed a group they call Humpty Dumpty. They are working to create scenarios for peace.
You can't eliminate war unless you've got a better activity, unless you've got a different activity that meets some of the same purposes, unless you've got something that's more fun even. Because we got to admit it, the Russians are just like us in this respect. They play two World War II movies every day on national television in the Soviet Union. Yeah. It's all you can watch in your hotel room. You see these bombs going off in the Great Patriotic War. We make war movies. There's something very exhilarating about war.
Seeing the hockey game between the United States and the Soviet Union, then, even in defeating the enemy, there's that transference of love to each other that you get in a sports event.
Because they weren't your enemy, they were your rival.
Right, and that's a
real
real
you always secretly love a rival, because without the rival you can't play. So you got to have them. There's a mutual dependence there.
When we can have the Oakland Raiders play the Moscow Patriots.
That's right.
Then we can start sitting down and talk about
Wouldn't that be great? That would be a Super Bowl. This thing we call a Super Bowl is just an America Bowl.
Сейчас будет вбрасывание, внимательно следите, это очень важный момент, очень важный. Так, вбрасывание, советские футболисты подхватили мяч, да-да-да, ведут блестящий пас на Крамаренко ловит, и сейчас он близко так у цели, сейчас, ай-яй-яй-яй, какая жалость, уронил мяч.
We've probed the stars and the planets much more thoroughly with our television cameras than we have other cultures just across the ocean. And the other cultures across the ocean threaten our existence. We've never had to know them. We've never had to learn their languages. We've never had to understand what's right about them. We could get away saying what's wrong with them.
Скажите, пожалуйста, что вы думаете об... What do you think about nuclear weapons, nuclear warfare? Я не думаю. I don't think about it. I don't want to think about it.
Rather than waste money on neutron and atomic bombs, the money should be spent on improving living conditions, houses, schools, raising the standard of living in peace.
I want to say to the American people that they must fight together with us against the atomic bomb for peace. That's all.
It turns out we are married. It's like we're married. The nuclear weapons has created a marriage of the nations on Earth.
We share this little planet, which is like a bedroom.
We share.
We're here.
Yeah,
you know.
Planet is like a bedroom. I mean, more important than the bomb is the fact that we suddenly have found we're all sharing a small planet.
We've survived the nuclear age so far. Civilization in its infancy practiced human sacrifice. In its youth, there was slavery. Today, we consider such practices inhumane. We're becoming adults. Can we mature enough to outlive the gravest threat of all? Bob and Alia envision a different kind of future, and they're not alone. Across America, people are forming groups to talk about nuclear war and to search for new ways of disengaging from the arms race. Professional organizations, including doctors and lawyers and teachers, are forming local chapters to carry the warning, nuclear war is hazardous to your health.
Nonpartisan nationwide educational efforts like Ground Zero Week are focusing media attention on the nuclear threat. With veteran peace activists joining these groups, the movement is gathering force. So it is with Frances Crowe. She still marches for peace, and last year she helped initiate a new idea, the nuclear weapons freeze, a mutual moratorium on the building of new nuclear weapons by the United States and the Soviet Union. With a handful of others, France has worked to give the freeze concept its first test by placing it on the ballot in her home region, western Massachusetts. It passed easily with 63% of the vote.
We had tables on Main Street. We did public opinion surveys in order to talk to people. We tried to be out every day with a new gimmick. We did a lot of door-to-door canvassing, and I think that was the best. We would say, you know, have you seen, do you know about question 7?
Instead of trying to get them to do that.
Well, thanks very much. I will
Yeah.
read this with great... In 33 of the towns that voted for the nuclear weapons freeze, they also voted for Reagan.
The freeze initiative was ratified by the state Senate before being sent to Washington. Massachusetts was the first state to pass the freeze measure. It has become a model for national campaigns and has been introduced in Congress. Recent polls have shown that 6 out of 10 voters support the freeze.
Most people, I feel, it's sort of in the back of their minds. They're really worried about the nuclear arms race, and they welcome the opportunity of talking about it.
Golden, Colorado is a typical American town. A group of students at Golden High School say they didn't think much about the arms race until they watched the film The War Game.
The movie really was terrifying. It shocked everybody in the classroom just pulled themselves in their seats, kicked back, and was just totally terrified. After the movie, we talked about it, and everybody just totally couldn't, you know, they couldn't stand the fact that we were all coming towards a nuclear war. First thing we decided to do was start meeting on every Friday afternoon and think of plans, what we could do to help.
I wonder how I can affect it in any way when my parents seem to have a hard time, when their voice isn't even heard, you know? And here I am, just a high school student.
If Russia bombs us, we're going to bomb them back. Pretty soon the whole world's going to blow up.
Even if one side wipes out both sides.
My opinion is that none of the weapons are going to be used.
Okay, but listen, all of a sudden,
But they are nice sparring.
all of a sudden, somebody gets panicky and says, rumor gets around that, hey, they're throwing a bomb at me. What am I going to do? Well, bomb them back. Push the button.
Bombs blow up, rumors just spread.
Oh, sure. The guy's sitting in his little radar screen.
With the support of their advisor, history teacher Bob Kinsey, group members are circulating a petition asking for a regular high school course about nuclear war.
I feel like I'm doing something to maybe help out in the future. I figure I've got plenty of years ahead of me. And if we could get a class going in Golden, an awareness class, that would be great. And being 15, it makes it so much easier because we've got all those years ahead of us. We've got, 50 years on, to work on this.
Would you die for your country? The honor of dying for your country is kind of taken away when you just get wiped out by I don't know. In a conventional war, I'd probably go to war for my country if it came down to that.
Well, in a conventional war, you're not.
Conventional war, everybody would go.
We kind of inherited the nuclear weapons from the previous generation. And I don't want them.
I don't hate Russians. Somewhere over there, there's a teenager just like me.
I have plans for when I'm an adult. What am I going to do? How am I going to raise my kids? How am I going to teach them? And then all of a sudden I have to think, wait a minute, what if I don't make it that far? What if none of us make it that far? There's still hope, though. There's always hope.
And the reason I'm involved, I guess the real reason, is I'm scared. That's the real reason.
It's easy to criticize something when you don't know what it's about, but if the people out in the community would just do what we're doing now, maybe they'd have a different perspective of what nuclear war is about and what their life's all about.
I think we've got the power, too. We're young. We've got a lot of support. We've got the strength. We know we've got the ability. And I think we'll make a difference.
Again. Cough for me. Now deep breath.
Professional groups are using their special skills to spread the word. Dr. Jonathan Fine is a member of Physicians for Social Responsibility, a group of 10,000 doctors who are warning people everywhere that nuclear war could be the last epidemic.
Your pressure, Pasquale, is good. You know, in general, 120 over about 64. That's very good. I like to say a doctor can take out his prescription pad. He's used to prescribing preventives and remedies. And the first thing he should do is see if he can write down in his prescription pad 1, 2, 3, 4 how nuclear war might be prevented. Okay? Watch your step getting down. Goodbye, Josephine. Bye. My patients aren't going to survive. My family won't survive. My children won't. The community I live and work in, both communities will be gone if nuclear war occurs.
This is Dr. Evgeny Chazov, Soviet Premier Brezhnev's cardiologist, appearing on Russian television to warn of the dangers of nuclear war. His message reached over 100 million Soviet citizens. Dr. Chazov came to the U.S. for the first Congress of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Their goal is to educate physicians around the world. Dr. Fine attended the Congress to exchange views with foreign doctors.
The essence of what I'm saying. We gather here, among other reasons, to reassert what I take to be our calling as physicians, our calling as healers. I believe that the healing ethos that we are trying to reassert here of the physician has always transcended national boundaries.
I'm optimistic about the role of this physicians' movement for nuclear disarmament. We think we can prevent nuclear war. In conclusion, I would like to say the following. Long live pure, clean skies over our planet. Thank you.
The afternoon meeting is about to begin.
This morning session, it was definitely clear for everybody that if happens a nuclear war, it will no winners in this war.
We understand this both as citizens and as physicians, that the consequences are unthinkable medically. There are always a few individuals who say you can't trust the Russians. And it's our job to say that's not the issue. We must work things out together.
People don't want to think about the nuclear war, and don't want to know what does it really mean.
Neither in your country or in the United States.
Sure.
How do we get people mobilized in our countries to end it? I'm convinced that's possible.
Well, it's possible, and it seems to me the best way to disseminate information, to go to the factories, to the plants, to meet the working people, speak about the nuclear war, dangers of nuclear war, what does it mean for the health.
Maybe it's a good idea that we pair up American doctors and Soviet doctors into pairs to go around to cities and towns and say, look, the arms race must end and that the people must act.
Yes, sure.
Well, I look forward to working together with you on it. We'll see you in Moscow.
Yes.
I'm serious. I'm going to come up.
I'm serious, too.
All right.
Now, I think if the public understands that dealing with people, whether they're communists or their children, whether they're their families or their adversaries, they're still human beings. They all respond to threats the way we respond to threats. We get angry. We don't back down.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, many thanks.
Sorry.
No, you got...
Roger Fisher is also talking about nuclear war. A law professor at Harvard University, Fisher designed the negotiating techniques used in the Camp David peace accords between Egypt and Israel. Today, he is focusing on the arms race.
Currently, people are pursuing the military option as a threat, trying to have it both ways. Trying to say, I threaten you with hardware, but I won't use it. Now, in the game of nuclear chicken, which we're playing with the Soviet Union, who can out-threaten the other one? It's a bad game for us to play. In that game, the odds favor the side that is more ruthless, more willing to threaten innocent lives. That is not a game for the United States to play against the Soviet Union. We don't want to convince them that we care less about innocent lives than they do. We and the Russians are in the same boat. There's not going to be a nuclear war that goes one way only. If we have nuclear war, it's going to go both ways. And if their end of the boat sinks, our end of the boat sinks. Now, there are some people that somehow believe if we make nuclear war very dangerous for the Russians, then somehow these Russians, if scared, are going to behave so responsibly, so carefully, that they won't tip over the boat, even though the boat is tippier. Well, frankly, I don't trust the Russians that much. I don't think they're any more responsible than we are, and probably going to do worse. I think those who rely on military force don't realize how dangerous the world is. They think there's a military answer. I say they're naive. It's worse than that. There is no military answer. We are tying our strongest arm behind our back. We've got this hydrogen bomb, which is dangerous in our left hand, and we've got these fantastic ideas, competent people, a history of democracy in our right hand. And people say, no, let's tie the right hand behind our back. Let's just threaten nuclear weapons. One of the worst things in the world, it seems to me, is to try and send a message by disconnecting the telephone.
Pope John Paul II follows a long spiritual tradition of advocating peace. Today, religious leaders of all denominations are calling for an end to the escalating arms race. John Paul visited Hiroshima, Japan, to declare his faith in our ability to transcend the use of nuclear weapons.
It is with deep emotion that I have come here today as a pilgrim of peace. I wanted to make this visit to the Hiroshima Peace Memorial to remember the past is to commit oneself to the future.
Is there really any hope of ending the threat of nuclear war?
Absolutely. Do I think it's likely that we will? No. Do I think we can do it? I absolutely think we can do it.
Well, if everybody tried to stop it, maybe we could do something.
If you could burn all the books and you could kill all the physicists, you might have a chance. But somebody, as long as somebody knows, if somebody looks at that sun and says, why is that sun giving off energy, and he has that curiosity, he's going to think about nuclear energy. And if he thinks about nuclear energy, he's going to think about nuclear weapons.
I think there is a chance of abolishing war and ending the arms race. I certainly do. I think that we just have to take our blinders off and start imagining, you know, a life without war.
This must be something in human nature. That, you know, people got to control things. You know, I see it in myself and I see it in my parents. You know, everybody's got to control something.
I should think the next election could change things a lot if the people want them changed.
But you can't end the threat of nuclear war any more than you can end the threat of conventional war, any more than you can end the threat of fighting with your husband. You can't end the threat of fighting. That's what people are like, and the question is, how are we going to choose to deal with the fact of the existence of nuclear weapons?
I don't believe there's any hope of absolute safety, of ending the threat of nuclear war completely. The Navy has enough submarines and the Air Force has enough rockets, and they have lots of quarrels between the two. And I can see a time when the Air Force might try to nuke the Navy, or the Navy might try to nuke the Air Force. It's not a very serious risk, but the reason there's not a risk is not because of the hardware. It's because of what's in our heads. And what's in our heads we can change.
You are a survivor of the nuclear age, and so am I. For 36 years, you and I have placed our future in the hands of the experts. We've observed the taboo against thinking the unthinkable. But today, our leaders speak of waging and winning a nuclear war. They have broken the taboo. Now it's time for us to act, however we see fit. The bomb has provided for the first time in history a method of total destruction. It also creates an opportunity for us to care about each other's survival. If we choose to care rather than destroy, then the existence of the bomb could provide the possibility for a new compassion and cooperation. It's not our leaders. It's you and I who will make the difference.
a major reason people do not accept nuclear war, do not deal with it, is that it's intolerable. And therefore they hold it at a distance. They make it seem abstract. One of my first arms control proposals, 10 or 15 years ago, was trying to deal with the fact that our leaders, our president, probably holds nuclear war at an abstract distance. You know, there's a man that goes around with him with a black box. He's got a attaché case with a code numbers. It's something like a 12-digit number you need to have in the right order in order to fire the missiles. My notion was to avoid, typically today I can see a president saying, well, the cable has come in, PSYOPs Plan 1, decision must be affirmative, notify JAG, XYZ, QT, in jargon, holding it at a distance. My notion was take that 12-digit number, put it in a small capsule, get some volunteer and plant that capsule right in his heart, or right as close to his heart as could be planted. So the only way to get it out is to cut the man open, to kill him and get it out. This volunteer would go around with the president with a big butcher knife by his side. And if ever the president wanted to fire nuclear weapons, he has to say, George, I'm afraid we've got to have a nuclear war. And White House staff could hold him down, but the rules would be the president himself would have to cut this thing out to remind him of what death is. It's blood on the White House carpet. It's somebody that you know, respect, an innocent person being killed. And before killing tens of millions of people who are just as innocent as the man walking around, the president should be reminded of what death is like. When I suggested this to friends in the Pentagon, they said, how awful. It would distort the president's judgment. He would probably never fire the weapons.
For a transcript of this program, call this toll-free number now, 1-800-528-6600, extension 60. Or send your name, address, and $3 to Public Interest Video, P.O. Box 19112, Washington, D.C. 20036.
Babies, I do wish you'd think twice about this.